Fitting in isn't always easy for a teenager, especially when you've just experienced extreme trauma, are grieving the loss of a loved one, and enjoy hanging out in cemeteries longing to be with young Victorian men. And if that wasn't enough, imagine also having to combat an overzealous, borderline evil stepmother. Senior year of high school isn't exactly going to be a cakewalk for Lisa Frankenstein. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm leaving the theater. One second. All right. This is Ronald, and I am leaving the theater after seeing Lisa Frankenstein. Lisa Frankenstein, written by Diablo, Cody, directed by Zelda Williams, starring Kathryn Newton, Cole Sprouse, Lisa Soberano, Henry Eikenberry, Joe Chrest, and Carla Gugino. I'm not here alone. I'm here with
Laura Nichols.
Laura Nichols, Boston correspondent. I don't think there's any Boston in this movie. Not
a scrap of Boston. Unfortunately, my biggest complaint, actually.
I just tricked you into this one.
Needs more Boston. That's my review.
Okay, so Lisa Frankenstein is, besides being a very interesting mashup of words, and actually a very effective mashup of words, it is a movie about a young lady in high school who essentially, through some series of events, brings to life a young man, zombie corpse, undead, if you will, and ends up going on a bit of a killing spree in order to continue to reanimate his corpse. Think the Mummy, the Scorpion King? No. Actually, think any iteration of the Mummy. Same thing. Got to kill people in order to reanimate the corpse. That's kind of what she's doing here in a very roundabout way. It's also like a teen drama set in 1989. Laura Nichols, what did you think of this movie?
You could also think of Frankenstein if you wanted to think of references to what she's doing with the dead body, but also the Mummy.
I mean, that's true, but it's like in Frankenstein, they're actually sewing corpses together more, and this one is more like she has to kill in order to actually then you know what I mean?
There's a little bit of a horror component. That's what I think. I found this movie delightful. I thought it was so charming and fucking weird and unique, and I'm a fan of Diablo Cody. I like her stuff because I think she has such a tongue-in-cheek way of doing this kind of story. And when I say this kind of story, I'll just say she loves teenage girls, the teenage girl experience. She writes them as complex and diabolical and so many different shades. And I think it's always kind of surprising. So I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't know what to expect, and I thought it was actually a romp. It was genuinely a romp, and the aesthetics were great. And it had a lot of camp, but again, it was very self-aware about its humor and kind of what it was trying to say. I don't know if the ending fully landed for me, but the story was so fun to follow that it kind of did not color the viewing for me too much.
So there's a little movie that came out last year called Cocaine Bear, and one of my biggest complaints about Cocaine Bear was that it's a movie that pretends to push the envelope but absolutely does not. It doesn't do what any of the movies of the 2000s, of the old schools, of all like the Farrelly brothers, those types of movies where they're just like, hey, the movie's called Cocaine Bear, we're going to send it all the way to the wall. It kind of sends it a little bit and then shows enough restraint that I think it actually makes the movie worse in a very specific way. This is how I felt about this movie. I'm sitting here watching it and I'm like, there's a lot of teenage stuff going on. I like that. It drew me in. I was paying attention to the story the whole time. But when it got to the murdery parts of it, I'm like, okay, let's be real. If these murders are real, if she's actually going on a killing spree, let's send it all the way. Let's send it balls to the wall. Let's have her killing 100 people, not just 2. I don't understand why it kind of stops at this kind of place where she feels nervous about these murders, even though she's already in a very fantastical situation. I feel like if you take a dead corpse and reanimate the body, and then you have a person just concerned about like the couple of spree murders they did. For me, it felt like those were two like mishmashing ideas. If we're going to be in a fantasy movie, I want to be in a fantasy movie. And I feel like all of those themes I was with. So by the time we get to the end and she does what she does at the very end, I'm just like, well, I don't know. Does that actually jive with what I just watched for the rest of the movie? I don't think it matches. But everything else you said, I agree with. I think the aesthetic was good. I also think that this movie was done so well that if this movie would have came out in the 90s or the early 2000s, it would be a cult classic. It would 100% be a cult classic. But I think it's going to be forgotten in this time period because I think there are good elements, but I don't think they did a full story to completion, in my opinion.
Oh, I have a couple things. One, Diablo Cody, she trades in cult classics. You got your Juno, you got your Jennifer's Body. She likes a weird sleeper hit. Juno was probably a very big hit at the time. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to disagree with you on the horror piece because here's what I think. I'm going to throw something at you. So get ready. Get your mitts up. Here we go. The horror, I don't think was the point. I don't think how many people she killed. I don't think the body count. I think the story they were trying to weave there is that between the grief storyline and the guy that they reanimated, I think it was about putting yourself back together. So piece by piece, they gave him body parts that helped her go through her story, win her way back toward herself after grief alongside his. So I think that was a little bit yada yada. I agree. I also think that was because the allegory of it was a little bit more, and maybe they could have drawn that out a little further. But I think that there's a lot of stuff they suspended in disbelief to make it appear, just kind of make that a little bit subliminal, more so than it be a story about horror. But I don't know if they fully leaned into the grief or the horror. I kind of think there was a little bit of both.
That's kind of my point, though.
No, I hear you, but I actually would not have liked it if they killed 100. Because to me, what is that saying about her? This at least said something about her. But also, I think there was so much humor and almost like self-awareness in the writing that I don't know if it was really going to be earnest no matter what it did. I don't think earnestness was really the point. If anything, I do wish they maybe dug a little bit deeper into, if I had to critique, the earnestness of what it meant that she was putting him back together to heal herself and put herself back together.
Yeah, I think what you have just written is a better movie. Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, everything that you just said, I'm like, yeah, no, if I had picked that up in the movie, then yeah, I wouldn't say kill 100 people. But I'm saying, like, if you're doing a fantastical movie, right. Or if you're going to do a contemplation on grief, then I'm like, yeah, then give it to me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking about Swiss Army Man. I'm thinking about, there was several movies that just popped up in my head as I was watching it. There's a movie called Idle Hands where the dude has the possessed hand, you know?
Oh my God, from
like
the early 2000s.
Yeah, there's like several movies like that where I'm just like, if they're going to do this like campy romp thing, then push it to the max. Yeah. But if they're doing what you're saying, then I feel like they didn't do too much of one.
Ground it.
Right, or the other, and enough that at the end, because I felt you didn't like the ending. Like, you did a thing that you do. You have a very quiet tell you do where you just like, when you like quietly shut down.
Dissociating.
Yeah. Well, see, no, and I've seen you dissociate before in other scenarios.
God.
So like when I sense it happening, I'm like, she didn't like that ending. But I feel like the rest of the movie, especially like the first third or so, I was like, I'm buying into this. Yeah. But you're right. If they did what you just said, I'm into it. Yeah. I think it's a much better movie.
Yeah, I will definitely meet you there. I think that's the main thing. But although I'll say what makes it such a romp is the performances are incredible. Like, Cole Sprouse is so funny, and
he's so good.
Does not speak.
They didn't give him anything,
and I could not.
They gave him all physical. It was great.
Yes, I think the actress Kathryn Newton. At one point, I realized she reminded me of a genre of comedy. She's giving me like a young Julia Louis-Dreyfus. There was like
She was giving me a young Helena Bonham Carter.
You know, maybe a little bit of both. Half a dozen of one, half dozen of 12 of the other, whatever. Yeah. But there's something about the way she delivered lines. She was making me laugh. I love this sort of the bluntness of Diablo Cody's writing, especially with young women, where she lets them be like people and not an idea of a young girl. But she also does a surprising thing with the stepsister, who would typically be an evil villainous character, ends up being like such a better, more lovable person than the protagonist. And that's
more complex.
More complex. Well, maybe. That's an interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but like certainly seems like some more surprising in her presentation. And Carla Gugino is incredible. I just watched her on Fall of the House of Usher this year, last October, and she's like unbelievable. Like, she steals every scene she's in. The performances totally owned that movie to me. So I think I was a little less focused on the story personally. that it didn't bother me that the integrity of the horror didn't hold up quite as much, or the integrity of the emotions. But it was just so much fun.
I think this will be one that like you could definitely put into the Halloween rotation. I think you could put it like Beetlejuice. That was another one I was thinking about where I was like, this is like almost like a romantic Beetlejuice. There's another movie called Warm Bodies with Nicholas Hoult where it's a romantic like zombie movie. So I'm just thinking about all these and I'm like trying to remember the ways in which they like charmed me, in ways in which this one I felt like I said, everything you said about the dialogue is true. I really liked the way she was delivering her lines. Cole Sprouse is a delight. Carla Gugino, not enough of her, in my opinion, but very, very good when we did see her. But other than that, I'm just like, I want a movie that's going to like commit to the bit. And it felt like this one was like kind of committing to it, or being like so subtle that I missed it, or not so over the top that I felt like it could have been even more fun, I think, in some ways. And it didn't hit for me. That being said, I still think that both of them, Diablo Cody and Zelda Williams, did enough to at least get another shot. I don't think that this is a miss by any means. But with that in mind, what would you rate this movie?
I would rate this movie out of, how many is it again? 5?
Come on.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 4. I'm going to go high. I had a great time. I think it's interesting you compared it to other films. I compared it to Diablo Cody's other work because I think she's fascinating, especially Jennifer's Body, which I know we had talked a bit about in the past, but it's like this cult classic that was really misunderstood at the time because it's about a teenage girl eating young men, and it was marketed as like a sexy, hot movie. And because a lot of people went to see it thinking it was going to be like this sexy Megan Fox comedy, and saw this like kind of treatise on like young women being consumed by the patriarchy and then consuming it back, and it's like horror and violent, interesting. Anyway, when I went into this, I was like, because she got buried for that movie, she didn't make a movie for 10 years because the reviews on that movie killed her. Coming back to this, I was really focused on how she measured the tenor of those conversations with like the freshness that she was trying to bring to this perspective, and I could really see the difference. So for that, I think I am biased toward her as a creator, given what had happened to her in the past when she wrote about young women in horror, and how much I just like respect that she's back at it, doing her thing, holding strong to her particular type of satire and wit. So that's why I'm going to give it a 4. It's my long answer.
I'll give it a 3. I think it's going to have a long shelf life. I think people are going to like this in rewatch. I think it'll probably be even memeable if it doesn't disappear. It's a weird time of year. It's February. The Oscars are coming. Valentine's Day, it's coming. And so I think a lot of people might get convinced to watch this movie as a date movie. So it's like good timing for that. But it could also disappear because Dune is about to come out. It's just a weird time of year when a movie like this comes out that could be perceived as lukewarm. So I'm interested to see how it does. But I think once it gets to streaming, it's going to have a pretty good performance. And I think the TikTokers and the kids are going to like it. So, and I still think, but I still think it's a movie that if it came out in the late 90s or the early 2000s, like you'd already have it in your Halloween rotation.
This movie is for millennials. That's why it takes place in 1989. Like,
yeah.
Diablo Cody's in her 40s.
Yeah.
Like, she made this movie for people who are nostalgic for that era.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the aim. But that's a good point. It comes out on Valentine's Day, which I think is on purpose to try to do this. So I'd be curious how the performance, too.
It comes out on Friday.
That's not Valentine's Day?
No.
Oh, fuck. Do I have Valentine's Day plans? Just outed myself.
Like, what? I don't know what that was. And with that,
Candy Hearts box in theaters on Valentine's Day.
It will be in theaters on Valentine's Day.
But not opening.
Yeah.
Why would it open on a Tuesday?
Yeah.
Wednesday.
And
I'm alone on Valentine's Day. All right. Just tell everybody.
and with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of Oh, It's Big Rod Studios. I am mixing this episode, and if you can hear a difference in this episode from other episodes and you're like, wow, I don't like the way that sounds, you should contribute to the Patreon. The Patreon is how we pay our engineers, and if you notice that I'm mixing the episodes, what does that mean? We probably need a little bit more money. Just a little bit more. Dig deep in those pockets, contribute to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/ohitsbigron, or you can go to the link in our show notes. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Lisa Frankenstein or Laura Nichols, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or Threads at OHitsBigRon. That's at OHITSBIGRON. You can find out more about this show and other Oh It's Big Ron Studios shows by following us on Instagram at Oh It's Big Ron Studios and on Twitter at Oh It's Big Ron Stew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being on the show.
Oh my God, you're so welcome. Visit Boston sometime. It's the best city in the world. Go Sox. The end.
I don't think Laura's going to be on the show. There was a movie I saw last year called Cocaine Bear, and the reason.
Fucking banger.
Oh, that was trash. I hated it.
Oh, no.
It was trash.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Absolute.
No,
Oh, okay.
That's the point. That's the point. It's not Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
It's Cocaine Bear. Like,
Yeah.
Citizen Cocaine
Citizen
Bear.
Cocaine Bear.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was right there, and I didn't take it. Yeah. I got you.
Take it easy.
Citizen Cocaine Bear.
There's a little movie. That's definitely going into bloopers.
That was so good.